hungry for the audience. Dina Gupta couldn't be here, as you can see, or maybe she is, and she's just morphed into a very average-looking, medium-height brown man, which is me. So I'll be doing it today, and I think she had some personal emergency. I'm sorry about that, but you will have to suffer with me for the next 40 minutes.
So those of you who were here on Friday will already know Adhirath Sethi, whose book, The Moving of Mountains, inspired me to buy it. Unfortunately, they've run out of the book. But so welcome to all three of you. Please give them a hand, and I'm going to leave the stage to them.
Thank you. Could I actually just request for the Khushwant Singh LitFest QR code to be put on the screen, if possible? Because, you know, it's a very small thing for all of us. We just whip out our phones, and we point it at the screen, and we click 500 rupees or 1,000 rupees. It really costs us nothing. It's less than an ice cream that we would have, but it makes such a difference to this foundation. Thank you. I see the phones coming out. This is wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. I said 500,000, but you can put 5,000, 10,000, I mean, whatever your heart's desire. But even that 500 rupees makes a difference to a child's life. You can imagine it's 20,000 rupees a year to educate a child, to put clothes on that child, give the child school books and all of that. And look at the number of people here. Can you imagine the number of kids that could be educated with just your 500 rupees today? Thank you.
Thanks. Before we start, I just want to mention that today's topic touches on topics of grief, of suicide. I know this might be deeply personal and even triggering to some of you. If you do feel overwhelmed or otherwise unable to continue, please feel free to step away. It's your well-being is of utmost importance. And again, as we discussed, the intention here isn't to dwell so much on grief, but rather understand the legacy we leave when we move ahead from grief and we fight it, as both of you have done so remarkably. And just want to quickly introduce you. I mean, I know it's they already said, but Dr. Nandini Murali is. Oh, yeah. So he's an author and a mental health advocate. She's also a expert at DEI. I think she has her PhD in that. And she's founded the organization Speak, after the loss of her husband to suicide. And it deals with suicide prevention and survivor support. And I think you've been a wonderful advocate in terms of how one moves on and deals with that kind of loss. And I had the great honor of reading your book. And it touched on many things that I think, as you said, you kind of look at it from the outside, but you don't really realize what a person is doing or surviving when they experience it from the inside. So thank you for that. And Pooja Bedi is familiar from, I've seen you somewhere, I'm not sure where, but it's
just been around a while.
No, I'm kidding. No one breaks Amir Khan's heart and gets away with it on my watch.
Slap him too.
But yes, but you have also, on a serious note, been a wonderful advocate and used your platform to speak out about grief. And you were here 2 days, of course, 2 days ago speaking about that. And speaking about how you live without apology, which I really loved that line when you said it at the end, and justifiably everyone clapped. But you've spoken about change, about transformative change, about when we discussed earlier about the legacy of dealing with grief and living with it in a way that is devoid of shame and is devoid of apology. And we'd love to speak more on that. And yeah, I'm just going to try and give the floor to you ladies, and as all good men must do, just step away and let you handle it. But yeah, there are a few questions, so I'll just start quickly. Dr. Murali, you challenged the term committed suicide, and it wasn't something I was aware of until I read the book and then researched and said yes. So can you let me know more about why that term is so unacceptable and how you're trying to change it?
To begin with, hello everyone. I'm super delighted to be at KLF since the LitFest commemorates an author who I have really admired, and deep gratitude for Rahul and Nilofer for having me over. As it's been mentioned, I'm someone with a lived experience of a suicide loss. This simply means I've had a direct personal experience of having impacted by suicide loss. I lost my spouse to suicide about 8 years back, And that is why today I do what I do. Until then, until it happened to me, there was this huge othering of suicide which I experienced. You know, it was for me until then, suicide can't happen in my family. I can't be impacted by it. It would always be headlined. It would always be sensationalized. It would be in some newspaper heading, or it would be whispered, hush, hush. But when it happened to me, that's when things really, really began to shift. And it wasn't rocket science to figure out there was so much of stigma, shame, secrecy, and silence around suicide, in the sense we don't have honest, open conversations about it. It is really hush-hush, or it is, there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation around it. And somehow I just felt that was not being authentic. And a little backstory, I work at grassroots. I work with people impacted by various kinds of marginalizations, particularly people with disabilities, people with cross disabilities, people impacted and affected by HIV/AIDS, with the LGBTQ plus community. And I thought I understood stigma very well. But it was not until this happened to me, I realized until then, I'd had a very cognitive understanding of stigma. My understanding of stigma was at this level. It was not from the heart. And this was in the early 1990s. I was working with a community-based HIV initiative, and I used to go there to meet the community as an arrogant consultant, armed with my PhD. And that was when I realized that I knew nothing about it. The community helped me realize that all my cognitive understanding was pretty useless, and they in turn, taught me a lot about the wisdom of lived experience. At that point, I didn't know that that would be a life lesson that I would be using in my life. But then I think life always gives us those synchronities and those serendipitous opportunities, and then you start connecting the dots. So when I wrote Left Behind, Surviving Suicide Loss, because I found that there was no narrative, honest narrative, and I think this was the first time someone in the country was talking about what does it mean to be impacted by suicide loss. And coming back to your question about why I think the language we talk about suicide is very important, because language, as we all know, perpetuates or reinforces stigma. There are several reasons why a person decides to end their lives. And for instance, when we say committed suicide, we place suicide in the context of crime. The connotation is you commit a murder. So committed suicide is placing suicide in the context of crime. And as we all know, in India, suicide has been decriminalized. But then what are the language we use to talk about suicide unintentionally further stigmatizes suicide. That's why my one request to all of you today is, from today, I even heard people using committed suicide. What is the alternative? What is a more sensitive, inclusive alternative? Died of suicide or decided to end their lives. So that is a less stigmatizing, less criminalizing way to talk about suicide. It's just not what we talk, it's also about how we talk about something which is so mired in what I call the 4S: stigma, shame, secrecy, and silence. And that's where the narratives have to change. That's where we need a collective change in, first of all, internally making that shift about how we view things, and as a larger collective, as a society, what are we doing to address this with empathy and compassion?
Thank you. And Pooja, you've had your own experiences with grief and spoken wonderfully about it. And yet when someone meets you, the first thing they think is, well, she's winning. And we spoke about legacy, and you spoke about living without, I really like that, living without apology. How do you think you were able to make that jump, and others sometimes get left behind?
Firstly, I'm not sure how many attended my session 2 days ago. And I spoke a lot about loss. I've suffered the loss of, my mother in a landslide, dying in a landslide, my brother committing suicide, my dog dying, the man who raised me dying, my grandmother dying, my marriage breaking up, all in a very short span of 3.5 years, from the time I was 27 to around the time I was 31 years old. So it was a very young age to lose everyone. Every 6 months, a dramatic loss, a dramatic loss. And yes, when we're talking about suicide, for example, it's very hard because you can't understand why someone would choose to take their life. There's so many questions, there's so much guilt, there's all of that that's associated with it. My brother committed suicide. Well, now let's not use the word committed. My brother died of suicide when he was just 25 years old. And the hardest thing for a parent is to see their child pass before them. None of us are going to be on this planet forever. Nobody is here to stay. We're just temporary visitors. My mother's book says, time pass. You're born, you die, a tiny journey in between called life. Do time pass, enjoy the journey. But yet we mess it up with so much, so much shame or guilt or confusion, or trying to fit in and trying to live up to something and trying to match up and trying to be somebody that we're not. And that's essentially where the chaos begins. Now, there's a difference in mental illness and mental wellness, right? Mental illness is very physiological in the sense that there's a chemical imbalance. You're dealing with the fact that back then, when my brother passed away, there wasn't much information. It was just pagal hai. That was the word used back then for any form of mental issues. Pagalpan. Right? Madness. And at that point they said, oh, he's depressed. Then it became, oh, he's manic depressive. Then it became, no, he's bipolar. Then it became, no, he's schizophrenic. So the analysis of what it was, the terms kept changing, right? And therefore the medication kept changing. And in the end, he took his own life. That was his decision. But who you leave behind gets impacted by the severity of the emotion that they are left with. It's a void. And a parent losing it, he was my brother. I grew up with him every day of our lives, with the same friends, the same toothbrush sometimes, the same food, the same boarding school, Lawrence School Sana. So, you lose a part of you, somebody you've known practically your whole life. And to a parent to see that happen, it's so difficult. But the question is this is our life at the end of the day. And whatever journey they took, we helped the way we could. We did the best we could. The decision is always theirs. How do you move forward from it and make your life, your decisions, and your way forward, thanking them for the time that they spent with you, remembering them with love and affection, not grief and sadness and pain, because you need to rise above that, because you have the most beautiful 50 years ahead of you. And you need to be, as they say, when your well is full, others can drink from it, right? So if you allow yourself to be consumed by negative emotions, let's just put those words as negative emotions, grief, sadness, pain, shame, stigma, all of that, you put yourself in that bucket, that's all you're going to exude after that. So everything in your life is, yes, but this happened with me, and yes, that happened. And it's normal to go through a process of grief, and you must go through that process of grief. But for how long and at what cost? To not just yourself, but people around you. That is the question. And that is the journey you need to empower yourself to take forward from there. So to me, that aspect of life and dealing with tragedies is what has taken my journey forward as a life coach and somebody who guides people forward to say, okay, it's happened, let's process it, but you know what? Let's move forward from this. Because it's like I give the example of the coffee cup. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the coffee cup example. A man is walking out of a cafe, and he's got this really hot cup of coffee in his hand, and the lid hasn't been put on very carefully by the person who served him the coffee, and he's carrying it sort of tentatively, and he's trying to hold it in his hand and trying to open the door, and somebody walks in, and the door hits the coffee, and the coffee spills on the floor. And so my question is, why did coffee spill on the floor? Because there was coffee in the cup, right? A lot of people say because the door opened, he wasn't careful, he wasn't this, the blame game goes on. Because there was coffee in the cup. If there's orange juice would have come out of the cup. So what comes out of you is only what's inside you, right? If there's anger, if there's guilt, if there's shame, all of that, that will come out of you, right? So what is in your cup? What are you filling your cup with on an everyday basis? That when you are shaken, what comes out of you? How to stay your positive best, how to stay your able best, how to stay connected with your own journey, despite of whatever may be happening in the world around you, and taking yourself from strength to strength. That has been my journey.
Thank you. You speak about the 4 S's, and I know you've already touched on them, so I won't go deeper. But the stigma, I read about when I was reading your book, but the stigma around medication, for example, in India especially, is a very, very serious thing. You can't take a pill without someone judging why exactly you're taking it. How is that changing, and how have you found it's evolved in the way we accept that kind of thing? Yes.
I'd like to situate 4S in the context of suicide loss. Suicide grief or suicide loss is very different from other kinds of grief. Actually, in the narrative of grief, there's no one size fits all. But today, I would like to focus on suicide loss, suicide grief, because that's a grief which has been very, very intimate to my mental landscape. How is suicide grief very different from other kinds of grief? And I discovered this. Though it was much later when I started reading up, I started connecting the dots. There have been other kinds of deaths in the family, and I saw the kind of empathy, support, the concern, the compassion that was pouring. But when I was impacted by suicide loss, I didn't find any of that. There was actually a huge empathy deficit. How did I notice it? People whom I considered family, people whom I considered close friends, when they came to condole, it was more about the death, what happened. You know, they came with a lot of intrusiveness, the kind of intrusive questions they would ask me directly. It was never about me. You know, I just felt me as a person, me as a loss was completely erased. Everyone had come there as judge and jury because for them it was an investigation, and they wanted to get to the bottom of why had this happened. And also asking me, I was the one who happened to discover that my spouse had ended his life. And there were a lot of other law enforcement protocols which were absolutely brutal and insensitive. The reason I'm mentioning this is very often people ask me, when I wrote the book, weren't you re-traumatized? I said, no. Writing the book was a very agentic choice because I chose to tell my story, and I want to make this very, very clear here. This story hasn't been put out to inspire people or to just grab eyeballs. Why did I decide to write this story? Because of the 4S around suicide loss: stigma, shame, secrecy, and silence. And the most powerful antidote for stigma is having candid conversations, honest conversations, real conversations. These are very challenging conversations. I could have chosen to keep quiet, but keeping quiet would not have helped me heal. So therefore, for me, this act of telling my story was very, very agentic. And therefore, suicide grief is very disenfranchised. It's a long word, but actually it means something very simple. It simply means you have no right to grieve. Society declares that because of the stigma, because of the secrecy, the shame and silence, persons impacted. And here I'd like to mention that women are doubly impacted by suicide loss. One, because of the nature of the death, and second, because of gender. And I'm not saying this just based on my experience. I've based it on extensive research in the last 8 years and talking to countless people impacted by suicide loss, whether it's a woman who loses her spouse to suicide, or whether it is a parent who loses a child to suicide. You know, their immediate aspersions cast. oh, what sort of a wife are you? You couldn't hold a husband back. Or what sort of a parent have you been? And I've known parents who've been absolutely fabulous parents. But somehow when this happens, it's as if, you know, it's women across cultures and geographies. We are seen as custodians of tradition and culture. And somehow this death really, really shakes the root of that. So why is this important? Therefore, because you have no right to grieve. That empathy, that support is not there. While grieving is a very, very individual, personal act. Grieving does not happen, friends, in an isolation or in vacuum. It needs a tribe, it needs a society. And that tribe or society is just snatched away when the grief is so disenfranchised like suicide grief. Suicide grief disrupts family dynamics. It's like as if someone has thrown a huge nuclear bomb and your whole family, your whole life shatters into smithereens. And each one in the family is grieving in their own orbit, but that connection is missing. Friends just drop away. The ones who remain are the ones who know have been truly, truly there for you. So therefore, and as a result of it, people impacted by suicide loss, they are at a higher risk of suicide themselves. So this is again a high risk factor. They're very, very susceptible to mental health conditions, PTSD. It's a very traumatic grief. And ironically, even in India, and this is what my book and my work has been done, even amongst mental health professionals. Suicide postvention. What do you do after someone has lost a loved one to suicide has not been given much attention. The entire focus, and I'm not finding fault, it's just that the trajectory has been on creating awareness, preventing suicides, and of course intervention. After a person has attempted suicide, how do you save that life? Postvention, what happens after that is silent. It's a huge gap. And this is where people with a lived experience of suicide loss, like us, we have a huge role to play, which is why we don't want to be reduced to mere footnotes or someone who's just put out a story and it stops there. We need to be part of policy discussions. We need to be brought into the drawing board. I know I'm talking light years ahead, but I think that's the way forward.
Do you want to touch on the medication thing? Just
yeah,
briefly?
a couple of things. One is, as I said, none of us are on this planet forever. At the end of the day, when you look at a life trajectory and you see a person getting older, you mentally prepare yourself for the fact that this person will pass. If the person is ailing, and ailing really to an nth degree, you almost wish that they would pass faster, right? Because it's a natural progression to death. Right? The saddest part is to die when you're still alive and not have joy for life, right? In a suicide, or say for example, like how my brother committed suicide, my brother died of suicide, or the fact that my mother died in a landslide and her body was never found, right? Sometimes there's no closure, right? And we all look for closure. We all look for the end answer. And when somebody dies in a very brutal and sudden manner, right? That's when the whole Pandora's box opens up, because there are so many unsaid goodbyes. There are so many things that you wish you had said. And largely, there's a lot of guilt. I wish I had done this. Could I have done things differently? What was left unsaid? Which is why I always in my conversation say, leave nothing for even tomorrow. If somebody's touched your life, tell them thank you, or I love you, or reach out to your parent. Don't wait till something dramatic suddenly happens to them to be able to live in regret of, I wish I just communicated how much I loved the efforts that they made for me. So it's never too late to start appreciating those who are already alive and around you, which is something we don't do on a regular basis, on an everyday basis. For example, with my brother, when the entire episode happened, I actually found a lot of people coming together. I didn't experience a sense of loss. It was, or stigma. Yes, there is stigma, but the fact is no one can make you feel inferior without your own consent. No one can make me feel stigmatized if I don't accept the fact that there's a stigma associated with it. So in my head, it was something that he went through, something that a lot of people in our society are going through, swept under the carpet. And 30 years ago, it definitely was swept under the carpet. And people didn't want to talk about a mental illness of any kind because there was stigma associated with it. So now when we very openly spoke about the fact that he has schizophrenia, and this was the reason, and this was the whole progression, and the medication, and the fact that the therapist turned around and told him, when he asked, he was brilliant. He was graduated from Carnegie Mellon, Dean's List with honors, super bright kid into computers and technology, incredible boy with an incredible heart, right? But his counselor, who was in charge of him, basically, he asked her, when will I be okay? I look at a computer and I can't think and I can't create. The medication that you're giving me is so strong. He loves food. And he said, I'm not able to taste the flavors of this amazing food. When will I be okay? And the therapist turned around and said, you will never be 100% of what you were. And he had this long conversation with my father saying, Dad, if I can't have quality of life, what use is quantity? If I'm going to just be around here with using half my intelligence and ambling along, and if I'm going to, sort of be in this, space where I'm not living my life to its 100%. What is the point of being on this journey? And Papa said, Siddharth, give it time. Things change. Give it time. But he didn't want to give it time. And that was his decision. He wrote a lovely suicide note, right? Mentioning, I was very pregnant at that time. I was very pregnant with my daughter, Alaya. And he wrote a suicide note. He mentioned me. He talked about how much he loved my mother and all of that. And when he passed away, and we spoke very openly about the fact that he had these, these different diagnoses, and it was schizophrenia, and the number of people that came up to us saying, thank you. In my family, A, B, C, D, E. In my family, so and so. In my family, this is my reality. My husband's bipolar. My child is something. And the number of people that came together, there was this large community suddenly surrounding us that reached out and was grateful for the conversations that were beginning, because at that point no one spoke. So you have to start these conversations. You have to be that beacon of hope and change. You have to be the person that creates that change and ripple of change to help other people. And that's essentially what my family did. We were very unconventional, as you know. We were very out of the box, and we didn't care about what people thought of us. What mattered to us is that other people shouldn't suffer in the similar manner. So how can we make that difference in other people's lives? How can we, if people are feeling stigmatized or outcast or left alone, how can we make it inclusive? How can we create a community of people where you do band together and you do find that sort of community spirit which can enable and help you deal with the grief and move forward, right? It's been 8 years now that you've dealt with this, and you're still, in so many ways, I can sense grieving. And that's so difficult, because how do you actually let go? And her book is beautiful. It's called Life Left Behind, right? And my mother, till date, there's this no closure because of not having her body found, right? And it's this incredible connection. And I always say, we are such incredible beings, us human beings, right? Look at us. We have 37.2 trillion cells within our body. Each cell has a voltage. We have 70 trillion volts of electricity in our body, right? So in India, we call it prana. In Chinese, call it chi, right? We have this ability to go beyond. The person who leaves this planet hasn't really gone. They're there in an energetic form. They exist in different ways around us. If I may give a small example, my mother passed away, and I was coming out with her book, Time Pass. And for the book release, we had decided to come out with a film based on her life. And the book is, I'm sure a lot of you have read it, it's available here, is her speaking in first person, it's her memoirs, an entire trajectory of her life. And we had a lot of clips, her speaking to Khushwant, saying naughtiness, all sorts of wonderful things that she spoke about, from her birth to her childhood, to being raped in her younger years, to the experience she's had, the relationships she had, the passion, the vision, the mission for Nityagram, her relationships, her marriage, her kids, it went on. So we took together all those interview pieces, and we're piecing it into a film for the launch of this book. And the director, I'm trying to explain to him her energy, her passion, her vivacity, and how that should translate into this film that we're making. And all of a sudden, when I'm sitting by the bay windows of my home, there was this massive dragonfly that came there and started buzzing. And I said, oh my God, we used to catch these as kids. We used to catch them by the tail and tie strings, and we used to fly them as kids like helicopters. Quite a mean thing to do. We shouldn't do that now. But, you know, and I said, gosh, this reminds me of a child. So I went to pick it up, and it caught my finger. And it went buzz, and I got the fright of my life, and I jumped up, and I was, you know, tossed it out of the window, and I was very pregnant with my son Omar at that time, and you know, screaming, and he's laughing at the most ridiculous sight of this pregnant woman and cute childhood and all this stuff. He's leaving. Minal from Cosmopolitan magazine is entering, and he's narrating the story to her when my mother's dance village, Nitya Gram, calls me up and says, something very strange happened. I'd like to communicate this with you. A group from New Mexico came in. There was a lady who was a psychic or a conduit, and she basically said, your founder wants me to speak with you. And basically, in a nutshell, she told in a lot of stuff, and she said, it was like your mother was sitting there. The language she was using, the way she was talking to us. And then she told Swarupa, you're my star disciple. I've left money for you, which she has in this lifetime. Every month it goes to her. I owed you in a previous lifetime. I'm repaying it back to you in this lifetime. And she says, and I want you to compose a dance piece for me based on the dragonfly. I will hover around all of you in the form of the dragonfly. Okay, this is, I have a dragonfly pendant on. I hardly ever take it off. But ever since that day, if I am ever in deep distress and anguish, a dragonfly will come out of nowhere and sit on my finger. I could be swimming in a pool and having a breakdown in the middle of a pool, and the dragonfly will come and sit on my finger. I could be in a closed car going from North Bombay to South Bombay, and if I'm having a breakdown, I'll hear a buzzing sound, and the dragonfly will appear from nowhere and sit on my finger. And it's gone on repeatedly over the years, ever since that moment. So we can choose to look at a world beyond, at realms beyond, at dimensions beyond our mortal, earthly understanding of life and relationships. There's a reason people come on this planet. There's a reason people get off this planet. It's your journey while you're here. Make the most of it, and all of us have the ability to tap and tune in. It's not my story. I've met many people to whom this is a reality, and that's again a conversation for another day or another time.
I just respond briefly to what you mentioned,
Absolutely.
Pooja. No, I'm not grieving. I'm healing. I think I've healed, and also in the context of traumatic grief, or in the context of grief, for instance, I don't think absolute closure is possible. We renew, we heal, we move forward, but there's no going back to the person we are, because if I was still grieving, I would not have been able to write Left Behind. As a writer for me, as an author, I've been hugely influenced by Indic psychology and Indic aesthetics. So for me, any act of creation has to come from a space of deep joy and absolute happiness, because I really don't think one can create from a space of sadness. And also the second thing about stigmatized grief is that people internalize the stigmatized grief. And in suicide grief, it depends on what was your relationship to the deceased. Whether losing a spouse to suicide is very different from losing a child to suicide, losing a sibling to suicide. Sometimes even losing a close friend, or when therapists lose, when mental health professionals lose clients to suicide, they're also impacted by suicide loss. So in each of these, the impact is very, very different. So I think stigma is also internalized, and part of this healing journey is, if we had had those safe, inclusive, supportive spaces. A lot of my work is with people impacted by suicide loss, especially in rural areas of South India, where I live, where access to services, where systems of care are still not responsive. And this is where I think persons with lived experiences need to be central stakeholders in the whole process.
Thank you. On that note, actually, I think you write beautifully about becoming really not the same person you were, but someone else entirely. And I think you said, I now see a stranger in the mirror. Hopefully I will befriend her one day. And that was in 2021, I think, when you wrote this. So I wanted, on that note, to ask you, have you befriended that person?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think I'm the same person who wrote this book. In fact, a friend of mine who read it, she said, I don't recognize you in the book. I told her, neither do I. I've transformed. And I think trauma is not what happens to you. Trauma is how do you respond to what happens to you. So that's where, for me, agency is very, very important. That's where, for me, choice making, meaning making. So for me, I really love this Japanese art form, kintsugi, where objects which are broken are not thrown off, they're not discarded, but they are plastered with gold. So for me, my scars, my stories are a sanctum for me. You know, that's where I heal, that's where I grow, and that's how I've transformed. So yes, and that's been a journey, and yes, I'm still a work in progress.
Thank you both. Before I open the floor to questions, you have another book, Dr. Nandi, which is Homecoming, I think?
That's right. That's just been launched again by Wesleyan. And this it's not a sequel. It takes the lived experience narratives even further. Homecoming is a collection of lived experience narratives of 11 women in urban India who navigate complex mental health conditions, told in first-person point of view. And why are we again telling those stories? To enable systems become responsive to the kind of ground realities which the wisdom of lived experience can bring, and enable care systems be truly, truly responsive to patients, clients' needs, concerns, and lived realities. That's just been launched by Westland, I think, a couple of days back. And another reason why we're putting it out is lived experience is not just stories. Lived experience is expertise. We are expertise by experience, and I often tell mental health professionals, we see the world at the ground level, at the worm's view level, which is very, very different from how the world looks like, say, up from 30,000 feet.
Well, thank you both. And again, to reiterate what I said in the beginning, if any of this has stirred up feelings that might overwhelm you for any reason, please do take a leaf out of their books and approach it in the right way, which is discuss it with someone you know, someone you care, someone you know cares about you, and don't assume you're alone. On that note, any questions?
Hello. So my name is Rajesh Khushwant. I have a different condition in my mind. I want. One day, like I'm 57 and when I was 55, I'm very happy in my life. I have a daughter, she's 27. So I thought I'll discuss with her. So I told her, like, I don't want to live anymore. Like, I'm very happy. I have no problem. So I said, I think like now I'm 56 and when I'm 65, I would like to go in some way that I do. And she's my daughter, no papa. So I made her agree for 70 years, okay? So I have 13 more years. But I'm really telling, I go to Goa, I travel 25 countries in the world. Earlier I want to travel 100. I have no wish. I have no problem. When I sleep happily. I don't remember anything. When I wake up, I think, okay, today I have to go to Khushwant festival. So I have no desire, and I'm very happy. And I love people. If somebody is poor, I think he's poor. Okay, his money is in my pocket. I started to think like that, and I also try to do good things. Not like I don't want to make a NGO or something. So I want to know like what is my condition. I also want to.
I want to know what's your hurry to get off the planet. What is your hurry to get off the planet?
So I wanted to go 65. So with my daughter, I said 70. But I told her like I'll give
like a billionaire coming to me asking me how he can get a bank loan. I just feel it. I think he has the.
But I'm very happy. I don't hate anybody. Okay. So I don't know, my condition is totally different. I also want to commit suicide, but I don't know, I'm very happy. And I want to commit, and sometimes, like few days ago, I was in Kusoli, one day I thought, 70 is too long, really. So I want, maybe I will do something good. and I will die for
What are you looking forward to? What are you looking forward to? Like, say you have a lovely daughter who's 27,
Yeah.
right? She's going to
I
have
have a
her
wife,
children.
she's amazing.
Yeah, so
I
you-
have no problem.
Okay,
with that.
great. So,
Haan.
all right. So then you'll have you have a daughter who will have her children. So then you'll be this grandparent.
So I don't
right?
know. I told her like maybe when you have a little one, maybe I might be, but I don't think that's going to happen because I'm very sure that I am very happy. I will go. So if you have any good idea,
Sir, your question.
please. Yeah. So if you have any good idea, how should I leave this world? Please tell me. I am 13 years.
You know, my brother researched different forms of suicide before he committed suicide. In America, you have a helpline. He was in America. That if you want to commit suicide, you call them up and they say, hi, and you say, I want to kill myself. And they're like, okay, and how do you want to go about this? And then you say, all right, so I think I would like to jump off the 12th floor of a building. And they say, yes, you could do that, but the chances, given statistics, is that 8 out of 10 people will die, but 2 people don't die and they turn into vegetables, right? Or you could be an invalid. So the rest of your life, you'll be on life support or like an invalid and in a chair. And you can choose. I mean, that could be an option. So then you think to yourself, okay, so that if 2 out of 10, what if I'm one of those 2 out of 10 and I'll be like sitting in a wheelchair my whole life or maybe in a coma state and being able to hear but not able to communicate? Would that be a better option? No, I don't think I want to do that. Then you say, I'd like to do this or I'd like to do that. And they give you counseling based on statistics, pure data. And you can decide and make an informed decision. And that actually is the most positive way to deter anyone because you're actually talking facts. So, you know, I would also suggest you to not be hasty with decisions because at the end of the day, you don't know what the end outcome of the action might be. And the best option if you're so happy is to stay happy. Till the universe decides, okay, he's too happy, let us take him. You don't need to make the decision for yourself.
One more question. Oh, there we go.
Okay, sorry if I'm allowed, it's not a question. It's just a little answer to my friend Rajesh. Rajesh, I'm a student of Vedanta, and basically what Vedanta says is that if all you need is a goal in life that is higher than you. That means it's higher than me, it's higher than my family, it's higher than my community, and the higher the goal, the better it is. So that's all you need to continue living till 170.
Absolutely.
And I'll introduce you to my 2 fabulous Vedanta teachers in Bombay. One is Janki ji, one is a Parsi called Adi Kalyaniwala, and they are absolutely fabulous, practical, day-to-day life.
Or the other thing is have 3 large whiskeys every night and be happy. Can you give the mic to the gentleman there, please? Just a sec, ma'am. Question.
I'm Emashul Kapil Kaur. Slightly divergent from the narrative that has gone so far. Questions to Pooja. This will interest people sitting here. When I was a child, I knew a gentleman called Baba Pyare Lal Bedi
My grandfather.
and his beautiful wife Freda Bedi. The question I have is, as you know, BPL Bedi wrote the manifesto of Sheikh Abdullah's Naya Kashmir. Not many people know. It's from start to end, it is his draft. And Freda was a Buddhist. How much of your mindscape and belief system, parts of it you shared with us, including the dragonfly story, are influenced by your grandparents?
All right. Well, I think legacy comes a long way. I'm also the 18th direct descendant of Guru Nanak Sahib. I am also, therefore, granddaughter of Baba Pyare Lal Bedi, who was also an energy healer. Not many people know that he has an institute above Venice in a place called Chittadella, devoted to his healing practices. He healed thousands and thousands and thousands of people through energy work. And these are people who were in the last stages of cancer with 2 months to live, 35 years later running his institute. I did not understand energy at that point of time. And to me, exploring that became a passion. curiosity. How is it possible? My logical mind said it doesn't make sense. I tried to make sense of it. I studied quantum physics, Newtonian physics, neuro-linguistic programming, clinical hypnosis, started doing the whole gamut of understanding the human nature, the human mind, the human consciousness, our subconscious programming. Now, whether Baba Pyarelal Bedi, my grandfather, at one point of time was communist in his mindset. My grandmother, Frida Bedi, was the highest ordained Buddhist nun. And she changed the lives of how many Tibetan refugees that had come in under His Holiness the 16th Karmapa. And the Buddhists believe in rebirth and reincarnation. We know that it is not the end. That's why a large part of when I speak isn't about the finality of death. It's about the comma that takes you forward into your next life, that takes you forward into your next journey. And what lessons you were here to learn in this lifetime. We have chosen to come down here as human beings. We were spirits. We were intelligent consciousness that chose to come here and embody ourselves in the human form, right? Everyone has their choices. Everyone has their journeys. Everybody decides for themselves. Don't be in a hurry to get off the planet. You're here for a reason. When the time comes, the time comes. Don't need to be hasty about it.
Do we have time for one more? Is it okay?
I have the mic, so
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
assuming I can go ahead. So we talked about how to deal with the kind of fallout of suicide, but the real thing is also was to prevent it. And one thing which I would like to say is that most suicides are done on the spur of the moment. It is not something, there are exceptions of course, it's not very well thought out in that sense, and it's just some spur of the moment. So putting barriers actually works. So I'll give you a couple of examples. One is Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. A lot of people used to throw themselves off that bridge, and then they said, let's put barriers, and there was this talk that why spend millions of dollars, if anybody wants to kill themselves, they can kill themselves another way, but it actually brought down suicide. And Pooja, you talked about the statistics of how to die. In the UK at one point you had, right from Poet Sylvia Plath onwards, that they stuck the head into the oven, because that was a very easy way to die.
Please don't tell the gentleman, he doesn't need to know. He's looking for a solution.
And it was available to women right in the home. It was a non-messy way, and there were a lot of women committing suicide with the gas, and then they changed the system. That gas went out and the suicides came down. So that's the thing, that at the spur of the moment, that easy way is not available. The person will stop and think, and then he will not do it.
I want to flip it a bit. The truth is that very few suicides are impulsive. You know, the one or two spur of the moment suicides, most people, it's not an easy decision to make. And, you know, to be or not to be, that's the classic Hamletian dilemma. And that's also what offers us hope to intervene. When interventions come early in that phase of indecision. No,
you're absolutely right, because statistics do show that yes, no one just suddenly goes into grief and dies, but you are a period where you keep thinking about it, you keep thinking about it, you keep thinking about it, and you need a trigger, and suddenly there's a moment that is a trigger, and that triggered moment leads you to do it. And she's absolutely right with that, because it does take a lot of thinking, going through those emotions, processing those emotions, and deciding you can't do anything to change it. Human beings have two basic instincts from birth: flight or fight. Either you fight to stay alive or you flee to stay alive, right? It's an innate, natural instinct, right? The child is born with two things: a fear of loud noises and the fear of falling. Right? So the human nature is to protect itself at all points of time. When you die of suicide, you're basically going against the very law of human nature, because our need is to survive and to be here from a very tiny age in infancy. So yes, you're absolutely right. And you may think about dying. A lot of us have suicidal thoughts at some point in our life. This is ridiculous, a heartbreak, or something happens, financial loss, lots of different reasons that people do choose to take their life. But at the end of the day, it is that split second when you suddenly feel there is no hope. And suddenly there's nobody next to you, nobody to guide you, counsel you. You call somebody doesn't pick up the phone. And this has happened before with a friend of mine. It's just that one moment you needed someone and someone wasn't there, and somebody could have talked you out of it. I have friends who call me up at night ready to kill themselves. And I talk to them at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning and talk them out of it very slowly, very gently, very lovingly. So you do need people out there that you can turn to. You do need a support system around you. And yes, you're right. It can be a very impulsive decision as well.
I just wanted the trigger, just as you have triggers, there are also protective factors and risk factors. Very often we confuse risk factors with trigger. For example, depression is a risk factor for suicide. It can never be a trigger for suicide. So my point is, intervention needs to happen when you identify the appropriate risk factors. Triggers are everywhere, and when the decision is made, the triggers just facilitate the whole process. So the whole landscape of suicide is very complex, it's very multidimensional, and I also think we should also not pathologize the whole thing. What we need is compassionate, sensitive, empathetic, informed conversations. Yes.
So on that note, I think we should not clap. It was a very heavy session. Let's just snap. If you like the session, let's just snap today, please. Thank you very much, Sarina ji. The mic's all yours.
And if I may ask for that KS Litfest QR code to be please put back. Those of you who have not contributed to saving a child's life literally, because education is empowerment, please do so now. It's back on the screen. Okay, they're trying, the Wi-Fi is not working, they're not able to do a QR code. Or you know what, you can take a screenshot of it. That's a great idea. Take a screenshot and upload it and do a... Yeah, so that's a great idea. Please do so, everyone. It really would impact a child's life forever. That's a difference you can make. Thank you.
Dr. Nandini Murali, Pooja, thank you so much for bringing so much insight to all of us on a really difficult subject of how to deal with loss and grief. And Rajesh, thank you for making it a lighter session than it might have been. Thank you. And Adhirath, you've stepped in remarkably ably into Leena's shoes. Thank you. A round of applause to all of them, please. Or snap your fingers as Manjeet suggested. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, please stay for